Hello, friends. Have you ever eaten in a really, really fine restaurant? You know, the kind that gets written up in the newspapers and for all the right reasons, not for all the wrong reasons. Um, I've had a few meals like that. Interestingly, I think I've had more of those kinds of meals in the context of Ananda over the years. Um, just simply made by what I consider world-class chefs here here in Sacramento. For one thing, I can think of 4 or 5 who I will not name, but you know who you are if you're watching this. But also in other iterations of Ananda around the world, from Ananda India to Ananda Italy, and to various, Ananda Village in America, Ananda Seattle. And one of the things that distinguishes a meal like that is the artistry that goes into it. Another, which is a very, very important aspect, and Swami Kriyananda has mentioned this a number of times in his writings, that the way something is presented. I remember Swami's cook, Leela, would everything that went on the table in front of Swamiji, and often his portion sizes were small. They were not microscopic. They were not minute. It wasn't like he got one spoonful of something. But a main course dish was often this big, a little tiny casserole, a little potato cheese casserole that, for me would be like one serving, half a serving or something, and I would go back for 2 or 3 more. For him, that would be all that he got, and he wouldn't finish it. But it was beautifully presented. Everything had a lovely energy around it. She did not go in for a lot of machinery. She never used a food processor, for example. Everything was hand done, intentionally so that she could put more energy into the food. And that's something that I've noticed in either in really, really fine restaurants or in these other kinds of meals, very special occasion meals that we've had, on the order of 2 or 3, 1 or 2 in a year, or sometimes not even 1 in a year. But just that kind of consciousness, you don't need to eat nearly as much. In fact, sometimes when people go to restaurants like that, they're a little shocked or even perhaps offended by the fact that, this dish that just cost them the moon didn't really have it wasn't very big. It was just this little tiny thing. And yet, if it was done well, and it was imaginatively created and presented, that's what you're consuming. Ultimately, what we're consuming is consciousness. And so I would suggest that we consider the consciousness of what we're eating. Because when it comes out of a box from a store and it's been packaged and shipped across the countryside, and it came out of a machine to get to the box because it was packed automatically by some machine, you're sort of in a way consuming machine consciousness, or at least not necessarily consuming very much of human consciousness, and particularly not loving human consciousness. I remember Swami invited a speaker from Italy to come and tour America many years ago, and he had created certain products which I won't go into, but in his lectures I remember him speaking about being Italian and enjoying his coffee of a morning. He would sometimes go to the little coffee bar near where he lived. And he had arranged with the proprietor, the barista there, that whatever else was going on in this guy's life, when he made coffee for this lecturer, he had to do it with love. And so, when he would walk in, the barista would see him and he'd go, okay, con amore, with love. And then he would make the coffee and give it to him, and the fellow would drink it, and he enjoyed it, and But in a way it sounds kind of silly, and yet you think of what is it that makes mother's cooking so amazing? Whether or not she's a spectacular cook, she's putting devotional love and affection into what she's making. And we need that in this world. When you eat out of a vending machine, and I don't necessarily literally mean a vending machine, but even just out of boxes and out of packages that have been kind of shipped en masse across the countryside, we're not necessarily getting as much of that. And we need it. We need to consume it. We need to provide it both. And so think of the consciousness of what you consume. And I'm going to jump to the philosophical level, because food is not just what we take in with our mouths. It's also what we take in with our eyes, with our ears, and what we read, what we look at, internet, television, whatever it may be. Consider what is the consciousness of what I'm consuming. And is that, the old classic saying, you are what you eat. Well, yes and no. Your body does, in a very real sense, take on those nutrients, or lack thereof, of whatever you just consumed in terms of your physical diet. But you are what you eat. You do tend to become what you focus on. We do tend to draw into ourselves certain streams of consciousness, perhaps without even thinking about it. We're drawn to some TV series, or we like sports and we tune into that. We gravitate towards that sport or that figure in sports, whatever it may be, that movie actor, that musical artist, whatever it may be. We can tend to kind of drift along without necessarily considering, do I actually want that in my life? Swami, when he was writing the book Art as a Hidden Message, he was noting that much of the art that he was seeing, and particularly in certain countries, it wasn't really art at all. It was clever, it was interesting, it was an effort to be different on purpose, but it wasn't necessarily conveying anything very uplifting. And he was saying, if you're going to buy art, it's like inviting somebody into your home. Do you really want that person to be in your home all the time? Is that someone you'd like to greet before you've had your breakfast in the morning? You want something that will encourage and uplift you. So meditate on, what do you consume and why? And like I mentioned in a different video recently, what do you get from what you consume? Because we do tend to draw from things the consciousness that is contained in them. So what is that consciousness? And is it something that you appreciate and want to continue? Namaste.